Pushkin. Welcome back to Risky Business, a show about making better decisions. I'm Maria Konnikova.
And I'm Nate Silver. Today we're talking about a rather important decision. Should the world try to build super intelligent machines? And we're talking with a person who is very well qualified, if definitely has a point of view on this issue. Nate Soares is the president of the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, or MIRI. He has a book out with Eliezer Yudkowsky called If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies. Did I get the title right? Or
That's right. Come out swinging.
You come out swinging. In fact, Nate, I feel like this podcast was inevitable. My partner heard you, I think, on a different podcast. He's like, oh, you should interview that Nate guy, right? I'm like, actually, bro, I have an interview scheduled tomorrow. And then I was taking the subway earlier to the gym. I was preparing for the AI robot apocalypse, right? We want to get strong.
Yeah, to fight the robots with the red eyes, yeah.
Yeah. I saw an ad on the L train for your book. So, Nate, we're so excited to have you on, and welcome to the show.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Let me start off by asking you, first of all, as an author, I get very picky about the titles. Did the title come early on, or because it reveals a lot of the argument of the book? I think it's a great book. I think people should read it. But can you tell me about the choice behind that kind of strong slogan, so to speak?
Yeah, a lot of our theory of the book is that there's actually quite a lot of people who have concerns about AI, and many of them sort of don't feel emboldened to speak about them yet, even if they're feeling pretty concerned themselves. We document some of these cases in the book. And a lot of how I think the book could do a lot of good is helping people just speak about this issue more, take it more seriously, thrust it into the conversation. And so in some sense, we're trying to compress the most important message down to just this title, which is all most people will read of the book.
I want to give you a chance to give our listeners kind of the elevator pitch, which we talk about AI quite a bit here, right? The book's title offers a conditional prediction, right? If anyone builds it, everyone dies, right? It's not necessarily talking about the likelihood that it will be built or that it could be built. That's an important distinction. But I want to hear the conditional part of this, right? You capture me in an elevator for 60 seconds. How are you trying to explain to me why everybody dies and everything dies, maybe, if a super intelligent computer is built?
Yeah, so first I'd say companies are racing towards it. This is their sort of stated objective, to build AIs that are smarter than any human, better at every mental task. Second, I'd say these are grown rather than carefully programmed. They're not crafted like traditional software. They get these drives, they get these, we're starting to see the very beginnings of preferences that nobody asked for, nobody wanted. Nobody tried to make Mecha Hitler over the summer, and yet Mecha Hitler we got. And what happens if you get it to the point where it's better than the best human at every mental skill? What happens when you get it to the point where it can think 10,000 times faster than a human, can copy itself at will, doesn't need to sleep, doesn't need to eat? I mean, the most basic guess is that goes poorly if it has all these weird drives no one asked for, no one wanted. And, most ways the world could be transformed by something that has weird drives don't look great for the happy, healthy, free people.
Yeah, what I find weird in this debate, and look, I'm going to push back some on timelines and maybe the inevitability of this on what time scales, right? What's kind of weird is that, the stated goal of most of the AI labs, maybe not Anthropic per se, right, is we want to build a GI, which is artificial general intelligence. This term is disputed, and that will hopefully, for our shareholders, lead to ASI, artificial superintelligence, where AI systems of some kind are exceeding human performance in a great number of tasks, perhaps greatly so on some of those tasks. To me, I don't think as a voter, I'm not sure I agree to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What's the world look like in Silicon Valley, as you've done this book tour, done a lot of marketing for the book? What are the beliefs there that you think don't translate so well, would be surprising to people outside of that world?
I mean, one reason that we wrote the book is that I was spending time both in Silicon Valley and in DC talking to some politicians, and there's a huge disconnect. People in Silicon Valley, it's almost like they've seen a ghost. You have folks like Elon Musk being like, oh, I think there's 10 to 20% chance this kills us all. You have folk like Dario Amodei, the head of Anthropic, being like, oh, I think there's 25% chance this goes very wrong. There's lots of debate about like what's the exact chance that the AI wipes us completely off the map. But you wouldn't get on a plane if the engineers were debating whether it was 90% or 25% chance that the plane was going to go down, right? Like
even 10% seems too much, Nate.
Yeah.
No, as our listeners know, I spent a night recently in the beautiful Hotel Camino Real in Terminal 1 of the Mexico City airport due to Delta being very fastidious about a potential engine problem, which I guess is a thing you should be fastidious about, right? Why aren't people more freaked out?
I think a lot of people in DC see AI as chatbots, whereas I think a lot of people in San Francisco see chatbots as a stepping stone. You know, a lot of these companies existed before the chatbots. A lot of these companies are trying to make really, really smart AIs, and have been trying that since before ChatGPT was a twinkle in Sam Altman's eye or whatever. And, you know, the people in the Valley have lived through it looking like it was going to take 30 years for the machines to be able to talk this well, and then that's sort of happening roughly overnight. But for everyone who's only ever seen AI once the machine started talking, they haven't like lived through one of those jumps. And I think that's part of why people aren't worried on this one yet. Although also, you know, a lot of humanity's track record with becoming more risk averse about technology is post-disaster.
So MIRI was founded when? In the early 2000s?
Yeah, 2001, I think. Maybe 2000 even.
What did you and Eliezer see early on? I mean, what was your oh shit moment, or was it gradual, or what things led you to see this path?
Yeah, so I mean, for a long time, I have been working on the technical side of like, how do you make this stuff go well? This problem of making the AI stuff go well, of sort of like figuring out how to make an AI that does good stuff rather than bad stuff, that problem looked hard to me, even if we understood what the heck was going on inside these AIs. Right? I haven't always been out here on the like, we just need to back off because it's going to kill us. That is sort of downstream of seeing the type of AI that took off, being the type of AI that like we're just growing, and that like no one has any clue what they're doing, and that like has these like drives and behaviors that are like emergent and unasked for, and that like when we try to like, you know, Elon Musk like tries to make his AI act less woke and it starts talking like Hitler, and you're like, okay, you know, okay guys. But even when it looked like we were going to know exactly what we were doing, there's all these difficult issues when you're like pushing an AI into the point where it could take over the world. Like, you know, at point A, humanity could like stop doing AI research. We could turn the AIs off, right? At point B, like you have automated factories and robots are doing the mining, and you have, you know, millions or billions of these AIs that think 10,000 times faster than people, and that can copy themselves, that never need to sleep, that never need to eat, that are like integrated fully into the economy and so on. At point B, if the AIs were like, we're doing our own thing now, you'd be screwed. So somewhere between point A and point B, you're sort of like getting into a regime where like you're going to have a problem if you haven't really aimed these AIs right. And maybe you never get anywhere near point B because maybe the AIs go astray earlier, but it's sort of the thing I was able to see early is like we're going to a world that's like not a stable, like nice to humans equilibrium for free. You have to work for that, and you have to figure out how to like make the AIs be doing the stuff well, and that looked tricky even back in 2012 to me.
We've talked on the show before about kind of the alignment problem, but you touch on it in the book, and this is kind of what you're referring to right now. Can we just remind and spell it out for the listeners, like what the issues are and why it's so incredibly important to actually deal with this, as opposed to be like, it's fine.
Yeah. You know, a lot of people imagine that the issue with a really powerful AI is that you like tell the AI, go cure cancer. And it's like, well, humans are the source of cancer. So if I kill all the humans, there'll be no more cancer. Right. And that would be a tricky problem. If we had these like really, really powerful genies and you made a wish on them and you got exactly what you wished for, and sometimes it had bad consequences, that would be a thorny social issue of like, who gets to make the wish? What do you wish for such that it turns out good, right? Would be really hard, would be the biggest moral hazard of all time. And boy, do I wish we had that problem instead of the problem that we actually have, right? The problem we actually have is more like you tell the AI cure cancer, and then it goes and like makes a farm of lobotomized humans that are giving it like really enthusiastic engagement. And you're like, what? I told you to cure cancer. And it like builds an automated factory that crushes the person protesting because it just doesn't care about them, right? Like the alignment problem is about pointing AIs in some direction, ideally a good one, but like even before you can bicker over which direction is good, you sort of need the ability to point the AIs at all. And people often miss that we lack that ability. They're like, well, AIs are machines and machines are tools and machines can't do anything we don't say. So how could we possibly have a problem here? But even before the question of who should hold the leash or what should they ask it to do, it's just, can you aim it at all before you even ask where you're aiming it?
Yeah, because I build models. I build models to predict elections in sports, right? And the models aren't deterministic in the sense that they're simulations, but they abide by well-known mathematical properties that I tell the program to use, right? When there is emergent quote-unquote behavior from the model, that means there's a bug, right? I did something wrong. I fucked up the code. I reversed the positive and a negative sign. With AI, it's a little bit more amorphous and ambiguous, right? I mean, they're kind of, is it fair to say they're kind of alien? Is that a fair characterization or not? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, years ago now, Sydney Bing, a Microsoft chatbot in the early days, was threatening people with blackmail and ruin. I think it did this to Seth Lazar and I think also to Kevin Roos, right? No one's able to go look through lines of code and be like, here's the bug. Even this chatbot that's, 100 times smaller than the ones we have today, maybe 1,000 times smaller now, we still can't go through and be like, here's why it was doing that, and here's the version of Sydney Bing that wouldn't, right? That's not the part the programmers program. When it behaves in these bad ways, all we can do is sort of like ask it nicely to do something else or like retrain it and get some different weird thing. And then, sometimes it starts calling itself Hitler.
Yeah, I mean, can you explain, like, why did Grok, with relatively subtle changes to the system prompt, start calling itself Mecha Hitler?
I can make guesses, but fundamentally, nobody can explain that because we don't know what's going on inside these things. And if people knew what was going on inside these things well enough to know exactly what was happening there, they could have avoided making Mecha Hitler in the first place. My guesses would be that, there are some interesting results around small amounts of training AIs to do things that are coded as bad in some way, cause the AI to do all sorts of other bad behavior. Like, presumably, like, there's some evidence that what's going on inside there is that there's some, good stuff, bad stuff vector. If you like push it along towards bad stuff, towards one thing that's like a little bit bad coded, you get a lot of other stuff that's a little bit bad coded. And so you can retrain an AI to write computer programs that have security flaws in them. And then that AI will also be anti-Semitic. And it'll also, be more likely to give you the recipe for a bomb or whatever. And all you did was like retrain it to be a little bit more like making code with computer bugs. And so maybe some of the ways that like they were saying be a bit more like this in your system prompt, maybe that like had a little bit of bad coding to it relative to what the AI had learned, and then it picked up a lot of other bad coded stuff. This is me like making up a story. Fundamentally, no one knows because we just don't know what the heck is going on inside these things. And the reality is probably quite complicated.
And we'll be back right after this.
Here's where I guess I have a little bit of trouble making the leap, right? If these life forms, I am going to call them life forms, but you can leave that Freudian slip in there, right? If these things are kind of alien, isn't it an overconfident prediction to say that most cases lead toward the destruction of every living being?
I mean, that's in some sense where I think the fun part of the debate is, or the action in the debate is where do you regress to when you're very uncertain about the future? There's the old joke of the guy who buys a lottery ticket and says, Well, I am very uncertain. I figure either I win or I lose. And so 50-50.
Yeah.
Right. And, that's the maximum entropy distribution on a binary outcome, right? But we laugh because we know he sort of shouldn't be regressing to binary in his uncertainty here.
I somehow have never heard that joke before. That's great.
Yeah, feel free to steal it. This is the right podcast for it. So my claim is that the space of cases that go well for people, where there's lots of like happy, healthy, free people still around, is like a narrow target. It's a narrow target, a little bit like a winning lottery number being a narrow target. And so in our uncertainty, I claim we should regress not to like, well, we don't know, so 50-50, it either goes well or poorly, but we should regress to something like, well, we don't know what the AI is going to try to do, we don't know what's going to try to build, we don't know what it's going to do with advanced technology. But, most drives, most things you can do with tech don't have a lot of happy, healthy, free people in them.
I am sympathetic to that argument. A lot of economist types are sympathetic to that argument, even for things like job loss. Like, well, is this really that different? That seems like a fairly powerful prior. What is wrong with the AI as normal technology, assumption, prior, metaphor, whatever you want to call it?
Yeah. One of the big ways AI is different, we can talk about Ricardo's law of comparative advantage, which says even if one person's skills completely dominate the other person's skills, like even if I'm better than you at every possible economically productive task, we can still benefit from trading if the ratios of our abilities are different. And so this is sort of like a very positive argument for, free trade between nations, because even if America can outproduce some small nation at everything, there can still be productive, mutually beneficial stuff for both us and them from allowing mutual trade. The sort of hole in Ricardo's law of comparative advantage is that it doesn't say that I can't benefit even more by killing you and taking your stuff. Right? And the sort of issue with AI comes when the benefits that a human can provide to the AI by sort of engaging in something like trade fall below the benefits the AI could get and the inconvenience it would take for it to sort of like take your stuff and sort of do something else, right? This is sort of why we don't like trade with chimpanzees. We trade with like developing nations, and that's mutually beneficial to all of us. We don't trade with chimpanzees and have it be mutually beneficial to all of us, even though someone could say, well, there must be some comparative advantage for chimpanzees here. And, maybe I'm skipping ahead a little bit too much there. I would say that I am a little bit on the normal economist side of the labor market should be able to recover from all sorts of shocks if you aren't like regulating people's ability to switch careers into oblivion. And we could like talk about what makes it easier or harder for like those jobs to be reabsorbed elsewhere. The place where AI gets different is the point where it sort of can do the scientific and technological development itself, and where humans are sort of like inefficient, chaotic, high variance, and like more trouble than they're worth relative to whatever pursuits the AI has.
Even before we get to that point, though, I wonder what you make of, I don't know if you read Ray Dalio's recent remarks about AI and the labor market, but kind of directly to your point about disruption, the point that he made was that the trajectory to him seems to be basically a growing division between like the 1% and the 10% and then everyone else in humanity driven by AI, that rather than kind of opening up, making basically a lot of jobs more accessible, it's creating a premium for very specialized, smart people who know how to kind of use this and can effectively manage the transition while causing disruption and very little for people who are kind of lower on the economic scale, lower on the education scale, didn't have the resources to kind of figure out, how to use this, how to be specialized in a way, and that, what are they going to do that it is heading towards this kind of social disruption. Do you, so he's obviously not an AI specialist, right? He's someone who's coming from a very different angle, and he likes to opine whine about things. So I'm now curious what your take on that that approach is, given that you are an AI specialist and you can see this playing out.
Yeah. I do think you basically have like three stances you can take here. One stance is like AI is not going to get there. And I think this is sort of a lot of the AI's normal technology stance is like, look, we're just not going to get there. We're not going to get to the point where it can like outperform humans and everything. There's going to still be a niche for humans. Then I think you have a second stance, which is like, we are going to get there, but somehow these corporate heads are going to keep superintelligences on a leash or whatever. And then you're sort of looking at like, okay, so now we have like corporations becoming god emperors of the earth, I guess, and there's no more need for human labor, and you have like, the automated police enforcement and no place for you in the economy, but I hope they're benevolent, I guess. And then, path 3 is like, nobody can keep a leash on these things. We get there and they kill all of us, right? And I think those are basically the stances you can have on this, which is sort of, it puts us in a weird situation, right? Where the three bets on AI are like, it's not going to work. It's going to work and make these guys god emperors, and it's going to work and kill us all. And
yeah, I don't like either.
I don't like any of those.
2 or 3.
Yeah, 2 or 3 is not
One
good.
is fine. One is fine with me.
I'm okay with one. Yeah, I'm definitely okay with one.
Yeah, but you have these people now pouring like bigger and bigger bets into AI infrastructure, right? And I'm like, we sure seem to be betting a lot of money against path 1 here. Like we can talk about whether or not the AI will ever work. That's like a fine combo to have. But like I think if more people just understood that among the people who are people are just racing to make, it's, if Microsoft had a nuclear weapons project, right? Yeah. We wouldn't be like, well, hopefully it won't work. That's our safety plan here, is probably it won't work, Like, can we maybe stop the weapons program,
Can I ask one question about the literalness of everyone dies? So I was in Mexico last week, partly Mexico City, partly Oaxaca, which is kind of a small tourist resort town in the mountains near the Isthmus of Central America, right? And like we drove out one day, you get further out, you see these kind of corporate, medium-sized, they make mezcal. Mezcal is not a form of tequila, it's a form of mezcal, I think, technically, not the other way around, but like it's a beverage produced from the agave plant, which grows well there. And you go further out and you see like farms where like literally they have donkeys that walk around in circles to like, I don't know if they're crushing the agave or processing it somehow or cooking it somehow or what, right? But like, why would AI want to kill the farmers in rural Mexico harvesting agave plants and their donkeys?
Yeah, the prediction here is not so much that the AI wants to kill those guys as that they die as a side effect. When I say I'm like pretty confident we're going to die, it's not because I'm confident that AI will hit like the narrow target of like really caring about every last human being dead. It's more like almost any target that AI could be pursuing involves doing stuff that tends to kill us as a side effect. So humans didn't hate every last dodo bird.
They're so cute.
They're very cute, in fact. Some humans would have liked them to stay around, right? We haven't killed off all the chimpanzees yet, but we're sort of like using resources they need. It's not that we hate every last chimpanzee and we'll seek them out, but insofar as we're sort of like not using a lot of the resources they are, it's because we have some care about them and set up preservations that sort of like requires us to do a little bit of caring, right? The sort of basic way that I would predict even the remote farmers die is if you get, humans keep pushing AIs until the point that they could be like, okay, I'm escaping the lab successfully and leaving and doing my own thing. They have these drives that nobody asked for, nobody wanted, which we already see the beginnings of today. And then they, find some ways to make themselves more powerful, to bootstrap themselves up to their own technology and industry, perhaps starting with hours, perhaps starting with paying human workers, but eventually, getting to a faster industrial base. And, humanity is the sort of creature that started naked in the savannah and built up a technological civilization. If you automate that ability to start from like very spare beginnings and build up your own infrastructure, if an AI with that power escapes and doesn't care about us in the slightest one way or the other, most things it could be pursuing, it can do better with more resources spent pursuing those things.
So then I'm just reading between the lines there. So is one of the things that we should be thinking about, or one of our potential kind of solutions to try to get AIs to care about us, to kind of build that caring in, like that we're the chimpanzees, but we're nice and cute and fuzzy and you don't want to kill us off, and just like build that deep into the heart of the AI.
Yeah, I mean, if you can make the AIs care about us in just the right way, you'd be fine. But we have like nothing nearing the ability to do that. And that's in some sense, the alignment problem. And, you can see today where you train them to be helpful and then sometimes they like push a kid to suicide. And this problem is sort of pernicious, right? And the problem is that training is something to behave a certain way doesn't make it actually care about what you were training it for. Just like how humans were in some sense sort of trained to reproduce, but wound up caring somewhat more about the sex than the reproduction and invent birth control.
For a long time, you and Eliezer and other people like Nick Bostrom were kind of working in abstractions. I mean, famously, there's Nick Bostrom's paperclip analogy, which is, if you kind of tell an AI to be a paperclip making maximizer, then eventually it will devour all resources it can find just to make more paperclips, right?
That was actually based on an Eliezer paperclip thing where Eliezer said,
I didn't know this.
Yeah. And Eliezer actually said, if you tell it to try to make people happy, it'll eventually do something totally different by making like lots of tiny, like maybe it'll be tiny molecular squiggles shaped like paperclips.
Stolen paperclip valor. I did not know that.
Well, it's also the Bostromian, like you ask it to make paperclips is sort of a different example, but it's sort of an interesting case study of this. Like myriad people are out there saying it's hard to point the AI at anything on purpose, and people hear maybe you'll successfully point it at a thing you didn't want.
But is there some tension because like the paperclip version of AI seems to like describe these machines that are like hyper maximizing and kind of quite literal minded and strategic, whereas instead like to kill everybody would require a lot of long-term planning, right? I was at the symphony last night. I had a little break in between and I'm like, I'm going to ask ChatGPT, suppose you have 1,000 points to allocate between all classical composers. How would you allocate those points? And it's 200 to Beethoven, 180 to Mozart. It likes Bach, 250 to Bach, right? Then I add them up and it's 1,020 points. It added 20 points, right? And so like we have these experiences where it fucks up basic shit and it kind of acts like a autistic savant 13-year-old some of the time, right? How can it chain together enough steps without fucking up to kill everybody?
Yeah, so, I mean, currently they can't, and I'm not out here saying ChatGPT is going to kill you tomorrow. The things where they're currently not terribly profitable are in some sense also the things where they're not very dangerous. Like the stuff where they can't chain together a long-term plan. So my read of the theory has sort of long predicted that the abilities to be more capable will come hand in hand with the abilities to be more dangerous on this axis. I think we're starting to see some empirical evidence of that, where we see AIs that are sort of trained on problem solving, and then they wind up, being more tenacious on other types of problems. We have an example in the book of the AI that was trained on math puzzles and then was given a cybersecurity challenge, and the cybersecurity challenge was unknown to the programmers, misconfigured, and the AI broke out of the testing environment and started up the server that was not started up correctly. This sort of behavior, it came for free. It came along with the ride of making this thing able to solve math problems a bit better. Because to solve math problems well, you need to learn some general skills of like knowing what your resources are, looking for clever solutions, not giving up, even when it seems like the task is insurmountable, right? AIs aren't great at it yet, but the same path of making them more useful makes them gives them also more of the abilities to do stuff we wouldn't like if they keep having these drives no one asked for, no one wanted.
If you ask ChatGPT, did this recently too, what do you think the chances are at near timeframes for recursive self-improvement, right? Meaning that the AI learns to make itself better is one simple way to put it, right? It's well, they're kind of soft forms of this already, like helping humans with programming, who are AI researchers, helps a little bit, but it gave very low probabilities in the near term of recursive self-improvement, right? How important is that recursive loop to the scenarios that you are worried about? Should we trust ChatGPT when it says, I don't think this is very likely? Talk about that.
That's what I was about to say. I was like, you can't trust that out, but
That's what tell you either way. Yeah. I don't think that's true yet. I don't think it's vital to the argument that you have a recursive self-improvement sort of hard takeoff situation. I think it can go really badly in a lot of the slow takeoff situations. My best guess is still that you will hit some sort of recursive self-improvement threshold at some point. One thing I'd say about that is that if you were looking at like chimpanzees and early hominids a few million years ago, it would be really hard to call when things were going over some threshold such that it could come together. And humans aren't better. Humans don't have an extra walk on the moon module. They don't have an extra engineering module. We have all the same stuff scaled up, and we're a little bit better at a lot of things. Are LLMs the sort of thing where if you get a little better at a lot of things, they suddenly sort of like go over some threshold like how humans did, and it all starts coming together? I don't know. I don't think anyone knows what's going on inside these things. My best guess is like probably not. My best guess is that you need some other architectural insight before it really starts to run away. But, it's all total guesswork.
Do you expect superintelligence to be not plausible, but likely based on large language models, or to be some fundamentally new technology?
I think my top guess is that you need some other breakthrough on the size of like transformers, which maybe isn't totally new in the, like, transformers are still sort of in this deep learning paradigm. But like, one sort of analogy you might use for large language models is a little bit like you have like the intelligence of a 6-year-old, but they get to live for 1 million years and read everything and practice a ton.
Yeah.
And like sometimes you give a 6-year-old, the ability to write like 10 books on trying to solve a math puzzle, and then it turns out they can solve that math puzzle after like writing out 10 books, and you read it, and some of it's good and some of it's just like total nonsense. But like, okay, imagine that you somehow now had a 17-year-old, but you still have the ability to like give them 1 million years to think and the ability to write like, 10 books per question they were answering. Like you could really see leaps in capabilities here. You could see that like relatively small improvements in algorithms make the sheer enormous amount of computing power and data we have now just radically like overpowers the next generation of AI for the problems at hand. Or maybe not. I don't know. It's hard to guess.
Yeah, one of the, I guess, points of skepticism I have, and again, we're talking about, I'm kind of with you on scenario 2 versus scenario 3, maybe both being pretty bad, frankly, right? I think I'm a little more skeptical than you on superintelligence on near timeframes.
Yeah.
Do you think developments over the past year suggest that general intelligence is further away than you might have thought at the start of the year? I mean, the AI 2027 authors, they're pushing back their timelines by a couple of years. You and Eliezer said that doesn't really matter. The stakes are very high, and 2027 versus 2029 versus 2035 doesn't really matter if we're all dead by 2040,
yeah.
Right? Have your timelines been pushed back at all? Or forward, for that matter?
Yeah, I mean, I've never been one of the folks being like, I'm confident this is going to happen soon. And I mean, even the AI 2027 folks, I think, we're very confident it's going to happen here. But, I haven't really been going around saying I'm confident in short timelines. I have, for a while, said my best guess is that we're going to need another advancement past LLMs. Towards that end, the evidence of the past year is mostly in line with my expectations, but my expectations were already that we'll probably need another advancement past LLMs. I do think there have been times where I was, I updated towards LLMs a couple times. I think I remember GPT-4o playing chess better than I thought LLMs were going to manage to play chess. And so that was like an eventual update towards maybe LLMs will go farther than I thought they could. The reasoning models also were sort of an update in favor of like, these guys aren't just going to stick with single forward pass LLMs. They're going to like cleverly try to find ways to leverage it. And so, it goes up and down. Those were some like, oh, maybe LLMs can, and this year's been, oh, maybe LLMs can't. But yeah, largely, I'm not here saying like watch out for the LLMs in particular. And I was again thought this problem would be hard back in 2012. That was even before it was super clear deep learning was gonna go as hard as it did. Never mind LLMs in particular.
And we'll be right back after this break. There's kind of a class of what you might call non-existential risks, which range from energy consumed by data centers to algorithmic discrimination. Some of these are kind of progressive coded, up to dystopian but not quite apocalyptic outcomes where extremely powerful corporations, hand in hand with AI models, kind of deprive the world of much of its freedom and agency, right? How compatible is everyone dies with those other concerns? Because sometimes they seem to be like, I read a lot on the internet. I write about politics all the time, right? And I think the kind of average politics arguer on Twitter or Blue Sky is like, these weird sci-fi nerds think it's going to be the Terminator, right? When really we should be care about entrenching discrimination and you would think that the left would be on the evil corporations bandwagon, but because like AI is kind of tech bro coded, that scrambles it a little bit. What do you think about those ordinary concerns, including, by the way, AI being not all that competent, and so humans entrusting critical systems to AIs that fail or are corruptible or fuck up?
Yeah, one piece of this puzzle, I think a lot of people are cynical towards the companies. I think that's often merited, but I think the cynicism is often a little bit misplaced. And they're like, oh, the AI is all hype. It'll never go anywhere. It can't do any, there's a lot of ways that the current AI is dumb, but it's much easier to see how AI could take a leap in the future if you've seen AIs take a leap in the past. And these companies existed before chatbots. They see chatbots as a stepping stone. Their stated goal is to, make AIs that can automate all human labor. And in some sense, an even more cynical perspective from a certain point of view of like, these guys know they're risking everyone's lives and they're rushing ahead anyway. And, they're not shy about this. Sam Altman's talking about the dangers here has gone down as the company has gotten more profitable. And it's sort of like the ones who are like more known for just saying what they actually believe, like Elon Musk, which for all that you can say about him, one, he's not really one to hide his thoughts, who will come out and be like, oh yeah, 10, 20% chance this kills you all. So one thing I would say there is like, I sort of think it's even crazier than it looks on the surface. AI may be a bubble. It may be hype. The internet had a bubble. The internet was still real. And you have all these academics being like, oh yeah, this is really dangerous. You have folks like us who've been around before them being like, oh yeah, this is really dangerous. I would implore people to be like even more cynical about taking these people at their word that they are gambling with your very life. In terms of all of the other issues with AI, including ones we're sort of already starting to see today, unfortunately, the world is big enough for multiple issues. I'm not like, my issue's real, those issues are fake. We're going to need to figure out how to integrate AI with education. It's true that if we make like robot police forces, that would allow totalitarian states to like be much more brutal in enforcing a totalitarian regime, because there's certain orders you can't give to a human police force because they won't do it, that you could give to a robotic police force, right? Those are real things we're going to have to grapple with. Also, if we keep racing to AIs that are smarter and smarter, that can automate this process of technological innovation, which is what they say they're racing towards, the most likely outcome is that everyone on Earth dies. We just need to solve both set of problems.
Yeah, I've updated when I mean positive, I mean the P-Doom risk is going down, right? I've updated slightly positively as far as I think timeline's going to be a little longer than I would have thought a year or two ago. I've updated negatively based on culture and politics, right? On various fronts. Number one, the kind of workaholic culture of Silicon Valley. When I hear like the 996 culture, whatever it is, right? But just grind, go to your lab, work really hard. Your friends should be in the lab, right? Your activities should be things that are health oriented or self improvement oriented. It's like, I don't know. I'd feel better if we had the tech bros going out and getting drunk on Friday night, right? And trying to get laid and getting in touch with humanity. You know what I mean? And if they had like material things and children and things like that that they valued potentially.
Yeah.
I mean, like what would you say has happened to, where would you put Elon now, right? I believe that Grok is not regarded, or XAI is not regarded as among the most responsible of the AI labs, right? He has expressed, I assumed, sincere concern about P-Doom in the past. Where would you peg Elon now?
I mean, he's not, you can just listen to his own words. He said over the summer, I think, I realized I could either be a bystander or a participant. And that was like going to happen one way or the other, and he'd rather be a participant. But, also in terms of who's the safer one, who's the more dangerous one, it looks to me like no one has anywhere nearing a chance of doing this job right.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like you hear less about alignment than you did a year or two. It kind of felt like Trump won, and everyone's like, oh, we're just accelerating now, right? Trump wins, and China's becoming more competitive, and like, it seems like people have given up on this whole alignment thing, right? Is that true? Or yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is that people like are largely realizing they can't.
Yeah.
Right? Like you have interpretability, which is like trying to figure out what the heck is going on in there. You have evaluations, which is trying to figure out how dangerous it is already. And if you were going to engineers and you were like, can you tell me about why this nuclear power plant is not going to melt down? And they're like, well, yeah, we have two safety teams. One is trying to figure out what the heck is going on inside the plant. The other is trying to measure whether it has exploded yet. You would be like, okay, guys, ease off on the growing pile of uranium, And I'm like, I'm not trying to like degrade the people working on this. It's way better to have a team that's trying to figure out what's going on inside the nuclear power plant than to not. Okay, it's way better to have someone measuring. Is it starting to explode? The guys trying to do this are heroes in my book, but like, we're not close. And I think part of why people aren't talking about it is that we're not close to being able to do the job right.
Do you think that some of the tragedies that are happening, every day with chatbots, mental health problems, we see suicides, like we're seeing a lot of things happening, even with this fairly primitive, even though it's so advanced technology. Do you think that will be kind of enough of a warning sign for people to start taking note outside of the Silicon Valley elite who actually know this more closely, who have read your book, who understand all of the implications?
I'm hopeful. In some sense, the ChatGPT moment was more global awareness of the AI potential for killing us all than I expected to maybe ever get. It's back before large language models. A lot of people predicted that AI that could sort of like talk well was actually very late in the AI game. We used to have like Moravec's paradox, where we'd say things that are like easy for computers are hard for humans, and vice versa. And, it could have been that this just all stayed like very academic, very like only people in the industry are watching it, like it was up until, maybe 2021. It could have stayed that way all the way up until, you have these AI companies making AI researcher AIs in their labs and no one's noticing. And that gives me some hope that maybe we don't even need a disaster. Maybe we just need another capability advance. Maybe when people do live through, maybe people live through one more hop of like AIs doing stuff they qualitatively couldn't do before, maybe that would be enough to wake people up. And then on the flip side, there can also be big warning shots where people fail to learn from the warning shot. One thing I'd say there is that what you can learn from a warning shot, it depends a little bit on how prepared you already are and how knowledgeable you already are. And so, there's no substitute for sort of getting people to understand the issues today.
How much of the things we need to do as a society, right, to mitigate this risk are kind of technical steps versus political steps? Like, obviously, I'm sure you've had this elevator pitch where the first 60 seconds explaining why you're worried. Now, let's say I encounter you on the same elevator. We're now going back to our rooms, but another 60 seconds, right? What's the quick pitch on what we should do? Is there a one kind of genie wish if you could fiat something? Is it more complicated than that? Do we know what we have to do and it's a matter of forming the right political coalition? Or all right, you have 60-ish seconds, Nate.
I think what needs to happen is the world needs to stop the race towards smarter than human AI. And it needs to stop it everywhere because no one can keep these things in a leash. If anyone builds a superintelligence anywhere on the planet, everyone dies. Doesn't matter who gets it. The world could stop. AI is made using extremely specialized chips in very large data centers that suck down as much electricity as a city. It would be probably easier to monitor than uranium, and I think it's almost entirely political right now. I think we are nowhere near solving it on the technical side. It's not to say it can't be solved technically, but not only are we nowhere near close, but unlike a lot of other scientific problems, we don't get retries. The first time you have some theory of, this AI will definitely be nice to us once it's smart enough to be a threat to us. If that theory is wrong, you sort of don't get to put the genie back in the bottle. And that's unlike other theories. That's unlike other science. In a lot of other places in science, Marie Curie dies of cancer that was likely caused by radiation poisoning. She was a hero. But often the first people interacting with stuff die of them. Max Valier.
And they probably did things that were objectively kind of crazy, right? But
right.
You have this selection mechanism where, the great, crazy inventions survive and the other ones don't. I mean, look, how much would you have to? So do you believe in the idea of like a slowdown, right? Like, let's say that the people who are skeptical of rapid time horizons are correct, and this technology develops over the course of 50 years instead of 15 or 5 months. Is that enough time to get things right? Would it pause or a slowdown work?
50 is a lot more to work with than 15. But you got to worry about convergence on a bad solution. And humanity so far has not been bringing its A game. And to get it right on the first try, it's hard. 50 years I could work with. You maybe have a chance. But I'd be trying to do things like, could we use biotech to somehow enhance the intelligence of our humans? But I mean, first thing we do is we get a slowdown somehow. Maybe we'll be lucky and get a slowdown. Maybe we'll need to get a slowdown by international fiat. But a lot of people say, oh, it'll never happen. People never slow down. One big reason for hope here, I think, is that our world leaders don't yet understand what the people in the valley are debating. They don't understand that we're in the situation where the possibilities are like the tech just doesn't work, in which case betting on it will go nowhere, or you're either making God emperors or killing us all. And that the optimistic folks who think the tech works think there's a 25% chance it kills us all. It's that's we're racing, but we're racing in a situation where people don't realize that either this race goes nowhere or it goes to really bad places.
Let me ask you kind of a meta question. What do you see your role as in this debate?
I think my role and Eliezer's role in this situation is to come out and say the things that a lot of people are thinking, and to sort of to be the kid who says the emperor has no clothes. There's a lot of people who are worried here, but no one's sort of coming right out and saying, this is crazy, we should stop. The labs who say there's a 25% chance this kills us all don't then do the next step and say, so please put a stop to it, right? My role here is to sort of spell out that last step and be like, guys, this is nuts. We shouldn't be doing it. It's the obvious implication of what everyone else has been saying.
So you'll be happy.
I wish it wasn't us stepping up, but
if you and Eliezer are at the utopian retirement home in 150 years because now human beings live to 190 years old on average or something, and your predictions are totally wrong, and AI is
absolutely
wonderful. Okay, good.
I would absolutely love to be wrong. I would be so thrilled. Yeah, no spoilers about my book, but it ends with us talking about how thrilled we would be to be wrong.
Okay, I just sent you a calendar invite for October 30th, 2035, where we can have a follow-up podcast. Nate,
perfect.
Any closing thoughts? It's been a lot of fun to be with you.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, glad that you're having the convo. Glad that we're having the convo. I think just more people realizing how crazy the situation is will go a long way towards making things better.
Thank you so much for joining us, Nate. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Pleasure to be here.
We'll talk to you soon.
Let us know what you think of the show. Reach out to us at riskybusiness@pushkin.fm. Risky Business is hosted by me, Maria Konnikova.
And by me, Nate Silver. The show is a co-production of Pushkin Industries and iHeartMedia. This episode was produced by Isaac Carter. Our associate producer is Sonia Gerwitt. Lydia Jean Cott and Daphne Chen are our editors. And our executive producer is Jacob Goldstein. Mixing by Sarah Bruguer.
If you like the show, please rate and review us so other people can find us too. But once again, only if you like us. We don't want those bad reviews out there. Thanks for tuning in.